She stood frozen before the enormous wooden doors of the church, her right hand locked on the golden handle, the French lace veil cascading down her back. The dress cost $150,000. The imported white orchids in her hair had been flown in from Holland. 200 guests waited on the other side. Everything was perfect, absolutely perfect, until she heard his voice cutting through the wood. She has no idea that I'm only doing this for her father's money. The world stopped. Amara felt the ground sway beneath her feet, as if the earth might open up and swallow her whole. The laughter that followed was from his best friend Thomas. Laughter she had always found warm and familiar. Now it sounded like shattering glass. Man, you're a genius. Marry her, wait 6 months, and when the old man dies, you're set for life with everything. Exactly. The idiot is so in love she doesn't even notice. It's almost sad. Almost sad. In that instant, Amara had a choice. She could run, disappear, leave everyone wondering where the bride had gone. Or she could do something Marcus would never expect. Something that would change everything. Those 2 words pierced her chest like sharp blades. She remembered that morning, just 6 hours ago, when she woke surrounded by her sisters and cousins, all laughing, braiding her hair, applying perfumed oils to her skin. The house was full of music, of joy, of women who loved her, preparing her for the most important day of her life. Her mother had held her hands that morning, her eyes shining with tears she was trying to contain. Amara, my daughter, you chose well. This man will make you happy. I see it in his eyes when he looks at you. She believed. God, how she believed. She met Marcus at a charity gala 2 years ago. He was across the ballroom, wearing a tuxedo that seemed to have been sewn directly onto his body. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that smile that made people around him stop to stare. When he crossed the ballroom toward her, Amara felt like she was the only person in the world. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, he said. They weren't, but she didn't know that yet. He courted her like something out of old movies. Flowers every week, dinners at restaurants where the waiters knew her name, good morning messages that made her heart race. And 6 months later, when he knelt on a private beach during sunset, a string quartet playing in the background, she said yes before she even saw the ring. A 5-carat ring that, she now realized, had been purchased with her father's credit card. On the other side of the door, Marcus continued speaking, his voice dripping with an arrogance she had never heard before. The best part? Her father is 72 years old, heart condition. The doctors gave him 2 years, maximum. I just need to endure this farce of a happy marriage until then and after. Freedom. With $20 million in the bank. What if she finds out? Finds out what? She's completely naive. Thinks the world is made of fairy tales. Yesterday she was showing me baby names. Babies. As if I would waste my life with crying children. Something broke inside Amara. Not just her heart. Something deeper. The very image she had of herself. The girl who graduated with honors. The woman who built her own consulting firm at 24. The daughter her father looked at with pride. Idiot. Naive. Farce. The words echoed in her mind like funeral bells. She was supposed to be in there right now, walking down the center aisle to the sound of an organ. 200 people on their feet smiling at her. Her father was waiting on the other side of these doors, ready to give her to the man he believed was worthy of his daughter. Her father. The man who worked 60 hours a week for 40 years to build an empire from nothing. The man who taught her to ride a bike, who cried when she got into college, who still called her my ray of sunshine. The man Marcus wanted to see die so he could steal everything he had built. Hot tears began streaming down her face, ruining the makeup that had taken 3 hours to perfect. She wiped them quickly, but they kept coming. She wanted to run, wanted to tear off that ridiculously expensive dress, those foolish flowers, and disappear. Go somewhere where no one knew her name, where she wasn't the idiot who almost married a man who saw her as a financial investment. She could do it. There was a side door just 10 meters away. She could leave, call a taxi, go to the airport. Her passport was at home. She could be in another country before anyone noticed she was gone. But then she heard Marcus's voice again. Honestly, the hardest part was pretending to care about all her endless conversations about family values and integrity, as if that paid the bills. She lives in this fantasy world where people are good and love conquers all. Thomas laughed. And you're about to give her a dose of reality. Someone has to. Something shifted in Amara's face. The tears stopped. The pain remained, tearing at her chest from within. But now there was something else. Something cold. Something sharp. Rage. Not the explosive rage that makes people scream. The quiet rage. The rage that thinks. The rage that plans perfect revenge. And Amara Thompson knew exactly how to give Marcus what he deserved. He wanted her father's money. Did he think she was too naive to notice? Did he think he could play with her, use her love as a tool, and walk away unscathed? She thought of all the times he canceled plans because he was busy with work. Now she wondered who he was really with. She thought of all the times he borrowed money temporarily for investments, money that was never returned. She thought of the way he always steered conversations toward her father's finances, casually asking about wills and inheritances. The signs were all there. She just hadn't wanted to see them. But now she saw everything with a crystalline and cruel clarity. On the other side of the door, she heard the guests settling in. The murmur of lively conversation, someone testing the microphone. Somewhere in there, her mother was seated in the front row, a handkerchief already in hand for the happy tears she would shed. Her father would be checking his watch, preparing to come get her. All those people, 200 witnesses, friends, family, colleagues, all waiting to see Amara Thompson become Amara Richardson in a ceremony that cost $150,000. $150,000 for a charade. She could expose him now. She could open those doors and shout the truth for everyone to hear. But what justice was there in that? He would be embarrassed for a few months, then move on. He would find another naive woman to deceive. Another family to rob? No, it wasn't enough. She remembered something her grandmother used to say. A woman who survived 3 dictators and 2 wars. Revenge served cold is not just sweeter, it's more effective. Amara looked at her reflection in the glass window next to the door. The lace dress, the veil, the orchids. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to look like. A radiant bride about to begin her new life. Perfect. She took a deep breath, smoothed the invisible wrinkles from her dress, adjusted her posture, checked her makeup in a small handheld mirror. The tears had smudged her mascara a bit, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. She worked quickly, her fingers firm and precise, until her face was flawless again. Beautiful, composed, confident, perfect for the role she was about to play. On the other side of the door, Marcus was saying something about a new car he planned to buy with her money. She didn't care anymore. He could plan whatever he wanted. None of those plans would come to fruition. Because Amara Thompson was not the naive idiot he thought she was. She was the daughter of Jonathan Thompson, a man who built an empire from nothing. She had his blood, his intelligence, and now his cold and calculated rage. Marcus wanted to play games. She was going to show him what a real game was. She adjusted the bouquet of white roses in her hands, checked her shoes, smoothed her veil one last time. Then, with a movement that seemed perfectly calm, perfectly normal, she extended her hand and pushed open the church door. The hinges made a soft sound as it opened. Marcus and Thomas turned sharply, their expressions transforming from guilt to panic in a split second. But Amara was no longer looking at them. She was looking at the aisle ahead of her, where 200 people were beginning to stand, where the music was beginning to play, where her father was waiting with tears in his eyes and a smile on his face. She smiled. It wasn't the shy, happy smile she had practiced in the mirror. It was something else, something that made Marcus take a step back. "Darling," she said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "It's showtime." The chapel exploded in admiring murmurs when she finally appeared at the end of the aisle. The white dress flowed like water around her, each pearl embroidered catching the light from the candelabras, transforming her into an ethereal vision. But it wasn't just the dress that took the guests' breath away. It was the way she walked, head held high, shoulders back, a slight smile on her lips. There were no tears of joy. There was no trembling in her hands, only a disturbing calm, almost supernatural. The groom exhaled in relief. For a terrible moment, he had thought she might have heard. But look at her, radiant, serene, clearly too emotional to speak. He adjusted his tie and smiled, that charming smile he deployed when he needed to convince someone of something. It always worked, but if he had looked closer, he would have noticed something was wrong. Her eyes lacked the dreamy sparkle typical of a bride in love. They were calculating eyes, eyes that had seen too much, eyes that knew exactly what they were doing. She reached the altar and took his hands. Warm, soft. The same hands that had held hers as he swore eternal love. The same hands that, mere moments ago, had touched someone else while he laughed at her naivety. The priest began the ceremony with traditional words. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today before God and these witnesses to unite this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Sacred. The word echoed in her mind like a cruel joke, but she kept smiling, kept her composure, because she had a plan, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to make her deviate from it. The priest continued, his monotone voice flowing over the virtues of marriage. Fidelity, honesty, mutual respect. Each word was a farce, but the guests listened with appropriate reverence, their heads nodding in solemn agreement. Then came the moment of the vows. "Do you accept this man as your lawful husband?" the priest asked. To have and to hold, in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, until death do you part? She paused, just for a second so brief that most guests didn't even notice. But the groom noticed. His heart skipped, panic returning for an instant. Then she smiled, that mysterious smile that he could never quite decipher. I do, she said, her voice clear and firm. I accept seeing exactly who you are. I accept knowing every truth that you tried to hide. I accept standing by your side until justice separates us. The guests sighed in unison, thinking they were just nerves transformed into romantic words. The priest nodded in approval. Even the groom relaxed, interpreting it as a passionate declaration of devotion. Only she knew the true meaning of each carefully chosen word. It was his turn to make the vows. He recited the words with practiced conviction, his voice resonating through the chapel. I promise to love you, honor you, be faithful to you in all things. Faithful. She nearly burst out laughing. But she caught herself, transforming the impulse into an expression of emotional admiration, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. What a performance, what a masterful spectacle they were putting on. As he spoke, his eyes drifted over the faces of the guests. Most were ordinary people, her friends, his family, work colleagues, all happy for them, all completely oblivious to the real drama unfolding under their noses. But then his eyes stopped on a specific face. Third row, left side, a woman in a navy blue dress, trying to appear discreet but failing miserably. She was sitting unnaturally rigid, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. And there was something in her face, an expression of satisfaction, of smugness, as if she were savoring a secret joke. The accomplice. It was her. It had to be. The other voice she had heard in that hallway, laughing with him about how she has no idea. Her eyes narrowed, just barely. Study her face, commit every detail to memory. The woman in blue felt the weight of her gaze and looked up. For a moment, their eyes met. And then the bride did something unexpected. She smiled. Not a hostile or accusatory smile, but a calm, almost friendly smile. The kind of smile that said, I see you. I know exactly who you are, and you have no idea what's coming. The woman blinked, confused. The smile unsettled her. She had expected tears, perhaps, or blessed ignorance, but not this. Not this quiet, unsettling confidence. She looked away first, uncomfortable and uneasy in a way she couldn't explain. The groom was finishing his vows, completely oblivious to the silent exchange that had just occurred. Until my last breath. Lies, all lies, but lies beautifully wrapped in the gift paper of eternal promises. The priest blessed the rings and they exchanged them, each sliding the gold band onto the other's finger. The metal was cold against her skin, cold and heavy, like shackles. By the power vested in me, the priest announced with a final flourish, I declare you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The groom pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that the crowd applauded enthusiastically. But as he kissed her, fantasizing about the fortune soon to be his, she was thinking of something completely different. She was thinking of a morning, 6 months ago, when she had woken up in his apartment and found a partially burned letter in the fireplace. A letter from a lawyer discussing her substantial inheritance and asking when she wanted to transfer the funds. She had been confused at the time. What inheritance? Her parents were simple people, honest workers who barely left enough to cover their own funerals. Then she remembered. Aunt Catherine. The eccentric Aunt Catherine who had moved to London decades ago and lost touch with the family. The aunt who had died quietly in her Kensington apartment, with no close relatives, leaving a modest but significant fortune to her only living niece. The bride had never mentioned the inheritance to him. She had been planning to use it to buy a house. A surprise for after the wedding. But apparently he had found out. And apparently that discovery had changed everything. How much exactly had he said in that hallway? £3 million. She doesn't even know yet. 3 million. So the letter had been conservative. And he knew. Somehow he had found out before she did. The kiss ended, and they turned to face the guests as husband and wife. The crowd erupted in applause and whistles. Rose petals showered down on them as they walked down the aisle, their hands intertwined, their smiles radiant. A perfect farce. The reception was set up in a luxurious ballroom a few blocks from the chapel. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables decorated with white flowers and scented candles. An orchestra played soft, classical music in the corner. Champagne flowed freely. It was exactly the celebration she had dreamed of when they started planning this a year ago. Before she knew who he really was, the groom was in his element, moving from table to table, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, drinking champagne as if it were water. He laughed far too loudly, spoke far too animatedly. Every gesture screamed victory. He had done it. He really had done it. Meanwhile, the bride remained quieter, accepting kisses on the cheek and hugs from emotional aunts with polite grace. But her eyes never stopped moving, watching, cataloging, noting who talked to whom, who avoided her gaze, who seemed a little too nervous. The woman in the navy blue dress was sitting at a table near the dance floor, stirring her wine glass, attempting to appear composed. But she kept looking at the groom. Little glances, quick, as if she were waiting for a signal, pathetic. An hour passed, then two. The cake was cut with appropriate ceremony. The first dance was performed with practiced precision. Speeches were made, some funny, others emotional. Everything happened exactly as planned. And then, when the clock struck 8 in the evening, when the guests were sufficiently relaxed with champagne and food, when everyone's guard had been completely lowered, the bride made her move. She walked to where the band was taking a break between songs. The band leader saw her approaching and smiled. "Ma'am, congratulations! Would you like to make a special request?" "Actually," she said, her voice sweet as honey, "I would like to request a microphone. I have a special announcement to make." "Of course!" He handed her the microphone without hesitation, proud to be part of this special moment. She held the microphone, feeling its familiar weight in her hand. Years of university presentations had cured her of stage fright, and this would be no different from a presentation, just with far greater consequences. She tapped the microphone 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed through the hall, cutting through the conversations. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. All eyes fixed on her, curious and attentive. The groom, who was at the bar talking with his groomsmen, froze. Something in his posture, that unshakable confidence, that mysterious smile made something cold slide down his spine. The woman in the navy blue dress visibly paled, her hands gripping her wine glass so tightly that her knuckles turned white. And the bride, standing under the golden lights of the chandeliers, surrounded by 200 expectant guests, in her impeccable wedding dress and her fresh bouquet, smiled. That smile that said she knew everything, and that the true celebration was just beginning. The entire room awaited that traditional moment, the moment when the bride, radiant in her white dress, would thank the guests for celebrating the happiest day of her life, the moment when she would shed tears of joy and declare her eternal love to the man at her side. But while Sarah held that microphone, there was something different in her eyes. They were not tears of happiness. It was something much more powerful. It was clarity. It was determination. It was the look of someone who knows absolute truth and is about to expose it. The groom, Charles, was right there, with his perfect smile still plastered on his face. But if you looked carefully, you could already see a slight sweat on his forehead. His eyes, once confident, now darted nervously, because he knew that expression on Sarah's face. And deep down, very deep down, he knew something was terribly wrong. "Dear friends and family," Sarah's voice sounded crystal clear through the microphone, echoing throughout the banquet hall. Everyone leaned forward, eager. "Thank you for being here today, for witnessing what should be the most important day of my life. Should be." Did people notice the choice of words? Some frowned. Others smiled, thinking it was just nervousness. "I prepared a speech," Sarah continued, her voice eerily serene. "Beautiful words about love, commitment, and fidelity. But half an hour ago, something happened that completely changed my plans." Charles's smile began to falter. His mother, seated in the front row, tilted her head in confusion. The bride's best friend, Anna, still confused by Sarah's inexplicable absence minutes before, widened her eyes. "Before we celebrate anything," Sarah paused, her eyes sweeping across every face in the room, "there is something you all need to know." The hall fell into absolute silence. You could hear a pin drop. 30 minutes ago, I was in the side corridor of this hall. That quiet corridor, you know, where there usually isn't anyone. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel in every word. "I was nervous, anxious, so I stepped out for a moment to breathe, to calm myself before walking to the altar." Charles was pale now, visibly pale. His best man, Richard, at his side, suddenly seemed extremely interested in his own shoes. And it was there, in that empty corridor, that I heard 2 voices, 2 very familiar voices, having a very interesting conversation. Sarah smiled, but there was no joy in that smile. It was the smile of someone holding all the winning cards. Let me share with you exactly what I heard. The tension in the room was palpable. People barely dared to breathe. First voice: "Are you really going to do this? Marry her?" Sarah imitated the tone of disbelief perfectly. Second voice: "Of course I am. It's the perfect plan. She comes from a rich family, she's naive, she believes everything I say. 2 years married, max. Then I file for divorce, take half of everything, and finally I can live the life I deserve." Gasps echoed through the room. Hands flew to open mouths. Widened eyes turned toward the groom. But wait, Sarah raised a finger. "There's more." Because the first voice asked, "What about that model? Isabella?" And the second voice answered, She paused dramatically, answered, "That one I keep. Obviously. Sarah will never know. She's too good to suspect anything." The room exploded. Furious whispers. Shouts of shock. Sarah's mother rose from her chair, her hands trembling. "This is a lie!" Charles suddenly yelled, his voice shrill, breaking the composure he was trying to maintain. "This is absurd. Sarah, you're having some kind of nervous breakdown. This is wedding stress, honey. You're confused." He tried to reach her, but Sarah took a step back, gripping the microphone firmly in her hands. "Confused?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Interesting that you use that word, Charles, because I recognized your voice perfectly. Every word, every pause, every calculated lie." "You're crazy!" he insisted, looking at the guests as if pleading for support. "I never said that!" "I love you. I've always loved you. Someone must have imitated my voice, or you misheard, or—" "Liar!" The voice thundered across the room. Richard stood the best man, or rather the ex-best man, the accomplice. The man was pale as a ghost, sweating profusely, his hands trembling. I can't take this anymore." All heads turned toward him like a synchronized movement. "I'm sorry, Sarah." Richard was visibly collapsing, his guilt overflowing. "I'm really sorry. I told him it was a horrible idea. I warned him, but he wouldn't listen. He said you'd never find out, that it was foolproof." "Shut up!" Charles growled at his friend, his good boy mask completely shattered now. "Shut that mouth, Richard." But it was too late. The truth was loose, and the truth is impossible to hide when witnesses start talking. "He planned everything," Richard continued, the words pouring out of him like a confession in court. "The 3 months of strategic dating. The public marriage proposal you couldn't refuse. The joint bank account he was already thinking of draining. Isabella, the model, who he's been seeing for over a year. He told me everything. Every detail. And I was too cowardly to tell you." The hall was in complete chaos now. Sarah's family was on their feet, faces red with rage. Uncles were advancing toward Charles. Sarah's mother was crying openly, embracing her daughter. Sarah's father, a large and normally calm man, had his fists clenched. "Is it true then?" Sarah's father's grave voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You plan to use my daughter? Steal from her?" Charles opened his mouth, but no convincing words came out. He looked around, desperate, searching for a way out, looking for someone who would believe him. But all he saw were faces of disappointment, anger, and disgust. "Mr. Thompson," Charles finally tried, his voice now small, almost pleading. "I can explain. This was taken out of context. Richard is lying. He's jealous because—" "Because what?" Richard exploded. "Because I have a conscience? Because I can't sleep at night knowing I let you manipulate an innocent person?" Sarah's aunt, an elegant woman in her 50s, stood up and declared loudly, "I always knew there was something wrong with that boy. That smile was far too fake. No one is ever that perfect." "I noticed it too," another relative added. 3 months of dating and already proposing? With an extremely expensive diamond ring? "I said it was suspicious." In a matter of minutes, social alliances shifted completely. People who had been applauding the couple just moments before now regarded Charles as if he were the worst kind of criminal. Because in a way, he was a thief of trust, a predator of innocence, a professional liar. "You don't understand." Charles tried again, his voice breaking with desperation. "I really love Sarah. Yes, I said those things, but it was just casual talk among friends. You know how it is, men say things they don't mean. I wasn't going to actually do any of it. It was just joking." "Joking?" Sarah's voice cut through the chaos like a sharp sword. Everyone fell silent again. "You call it joking to plan on using me, stealing from me, betraying me, and then discarding me like trash?" Tears finally began to run down her face. Not tears of weakness. They were tears of righteous anger, of deep betrayal, of destroyed innocence. "I trusted you," her voice trembled, but remained strong. "I believed every word, every promise, every I love you that came from your lying mouth." Charles took a step toward her, but Sarah's father immediately blocked his path, an impenetrable wall of paternal rage. "You don't get near my daughter," the man growled, his voice low and dangerous. And then Charles made the final mistake, the mistake that would completely seal his social destruction. "All right," he shouted, his frustration and panic exploding into uncontrolled rage. "You want the truth? Yes. I said those things because she is naive. She believes in fairy tales. She's a spoiled, rich little girl who never had to be smart because Daddy was always there to fix everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Charles immediately realized what he had done. His hands flew to his mouth. His eyes widened. "No, I didn't mean—" But it was too late. Far too late, because now it wasn't just Sarah's family against him. It was every single person in that room. Even his own mother was looking at him with horror and disappointment. "Leave," Sarah said simply, her voice calm again. Calm and final. "Leave my wedding. Leave my life. Leave my sight." "Sarah, please." Get out! This time it was Sarah's mother who shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. You heard my daughter! Out! Security was already approaching. Charles looked around one last time, seeing nothing but faces of disgust and condemnation. He was ruined, socially destroyed, his reputation in pieces. He began to back toward the exit, stumbling over his own feet, his composure completely shattered. I hope it was worth it, someone shouted from the crowd. I hope your lies were worth it. And then he was gone. Expelled. Humiliated. Destroyed. The room erupted in chatter again, everyone processing the drama they had just witnessed. Sarah was surrounded by her family, being embraced, being comforted, being protected. But then she gently pulled away from the embraces and walked back to the center microphone. Everyone fell silent immediately, curious. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for believing in me, for supporting me, for seeing the truth. Applause began to erupt, but she raised her hand, asking for silence. But I'm not finished yet, she announced. And there was something new in her voice now, something that made everyone pay attention again. Because you see, what you don't know is... She paused, her eyes gleaming with something that seemed almost... amusement. Dark amusement. I discovered far more than just that conversation, and you won't believe what else I uncovered about who Charles really is. People's eyes widened. More revelations? How could this possibly get any worse? So please, Sarah smiled, that mysterious smile returning to her lips. Get comfortable, because this story is just beginning, and what comes next is going to make all of this seem small. The entire hall was on the edge of their seats, completely hypnotized, completely engaged. Because if that first revelation was so shocking, so devastating, so absolutely dramatic, what on earth could come next? And Sarah? Sarah knew exactly what was coming next, and she was about to detonate a bomb that would change everything. The groom tried to back away, tried to raise his hands in a pathetic gesture of appeasement. Wait, let me explain. Explain what? The bride's father's voice cut through the air like a blade. Explain how you planned to steal my daughter. Explain how you tried to destroy her life? The guests moved instinctively, blocking all the exits. There was no escape. There was no way to avoid the judgment that was about to descend upon him. The best friend began to tremble. Her legs gave way and she leaned on the table, her face crumbling into pure panic. I didn't know it would go this far. He said that I was what? The bride stepped forward, her voice calm but charged with power. That I was easy? That I was stupid? That I would be a perfect victim? The silence was absolute. Every word fell like a sentence. You two made a mistake. The bride raised her hand, and her father placed a thick envelope in it. A terrible mistake. The groom looked at the envelope, and for the first time, something beyond arrogance gleamed in his eyes. Fear. You thought you knew who I am. The bride opened the envelope slowly, savoring every second. You thought you knew what I'm worth. You thought you knew who you were dealing with. She withdrew the first document. A diploma. A prestigious international university that made everyone's eyes widen. You saw a kind woman and mistook it for weakness. She placed the diploma on the table for all to see. You saw someone who chose to be humble and thought it was lack of options. The second document. A deed. Properties. Multiple properties at addresses that made the guests whisper among themselves. You looked at my simplicity and didn't realize it was a choice. Her voice was growing, gaining strength. Didn't realize I could have anything. Didn't realize I chose to have you. The groom stepped back further, his face paling as he grasped the magnitude of his mistake. The third document landed on the table with decisive force. Corporate contracts, stocks, stakes in companies he only knew by names in financial news. But what you didn't know? The bride paused, letting the tension reach its peak. What you never imagined. She withdrew the last document. A certificate, a family name that made the blood drain completely from the groom's face. I am an heir to the Almeida family. The hall erupted in muffled exclamations. The Almeida family, one of the most powerful dynasties in the country. Old money. Influence that stretched across generations. No. The groom staggered as if he had taken a physical punch. No, you never said... You never. Never what? The bride tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with a coldness that made the air seem frozen. Never flaunted? Never boasted? Never used my last name to impress? She laughed, but there was no humor in that sound. Only cold, calculated justice. I hid who I was because I wanted to know if you loved me for real. If you loved the woman, not the fortune. Her voice faltered for an instant, showing the real pain beneath the armor. I gave you the chance to love me for who I am, and you chose to betray me for what you thought I had. The groom gripped the edge of the table, his fingers white with tension. His world was crumbling, brick by brick, revelation by revelation. You know what's funniest? The bride smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. Your whole ridiculous plan to get everything, you would have gotten crumbs. The apartment you wanted so badly? I rent it. The car? Borrowed from my brother. The jewelry? Costume jewelry. She gestured to the documents scattered across the table. My true wealth you never saw, because I never allowed it. Because I wanted to be sure. Her voice hardened. And you proved exactly who you are. The best friend sobbed, collapsing to her knees. I didn't know. If I had known. I swear I didn't know what? The bride's mother advanced, her face twisted in maternal fury. Didn't know you were stabbing one of us in the back? Didn't know you were destroying a life? You knew enough. The bride's father pointed at her, his voice thundering through the hall. You knew you were betraying a friendship. You knew you were conspiring to steal. You knew you were lying and manipulating. Her parents moved closer, forming a semicircle of judgment. The bride's aunt spoke, her voice cutting. And you, she pointed at the groom, you thought you were being clever, thought you were winning a game. But you played against someone who wasn't even in your league. The bride's brother stepped forward, his imposing bearing casting a shadow over the cowering groom. You tried to deceive a woman who could buy everything you are 10 times over and still have change left. The bride's cousin added, his voice laden with contempt. You sold your dignity for a plate of lentils that wasn't even real. The guests began to whisper, their voices swelling into a chorus of collective judgment. What a shame. How dare he? And with her best friend, he has no character. She deserves better. People like this don't deserve happiness. The groom looked around, desperate, searching for a friendly face, a way out, anything. But he found only looks of disdain, of disgust, of absolute condemnation. His mother looked away, ashamed. His friends retreated, not wanting to be associated with him. Even his brothers, who had gathered to celebrate, now looked at him with expressions of shock and disbelief. Do you realize now? The bride approached him, forcing him to face her. Do you realize what you lost? His eyes filled with tears, not from remorse, but from wounded pride, from the belated understanding of his own catastrophic miscalculation. I would have given you everything. Her voice became soft, almost gentle, which somehow was worse than the anger. My heart, my loyalty, my entire life, and eventually, yes, my fortune too. She touched his face lightly, a final gesture of tenderness that cut deeper than any accusation. The groom opened his mouth, but no sound came out. There were no words. There were no apologies. There was no way to undo what had been revealed. And her? The bride turned to the best friend, still on her knees on the floor. My friend since I was 8 years old, the person I trusted with my secrets, my hopes, my fears. The woman sobbed, extending her hands in supplication. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Envy, the bride's aunt declared, her voice echoing through the hall. Pure and simple envy. She always envied you. One of the cousins spoke. Always wanted what you had. Always tried to be you. And when she saw that you were happy, she couldn't bear it, another guest added, so she decided to destroy. The best friend shook her head frantically, but her own eyes betrayed her, because it was true, and everyone could see it. You two? The bride stepped back, creating physical and emotional distance. You two deserve each other. She looked at her family, at the guests who supported her, at all the people who had come to witness what should have been her union. But I deserve better. And slowly, deliberately, she removed the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond caught the light, shining for one last moment before she placed it on the table next to all the documents that proved who she really was. I loved you for real. Her voice was firm, final. You loved only what you thought I could give you. The ring lay there, a rejected symbol, a broken promise, a canceled future. And that's the difference between us. The bride straightened her shoulders, reclaiming her complete dignity. I had love to offer. You had only greed. The groom looked at the ring, at the woman he had lost, at the fortune that would never be his. And finally, completely, his face collapsed. Not in tears of remorse, but under the crushing weight of understanding the catastrophic magnitude of his own betrayal. He hadn't just lost a woman. He had lost a partner, a fortune, a future, and all his dignity in front of everyone he knew. The best friend continued sobbing on the floor, but no one moved to comfort her. She had made her choice. Now she faced the consequences. The guests looked at the bride with new understanding, new respect. She was more than a betrayed woman. She was a force, an heiress, a person of real substance who had been tested and emerged not broken, but strengthened. Now you know. The bride looked around the hall, her voice reaching every corner. Now everyone knows who I really am. She paused, letting the moment settle. And more importantly, her eyes returned to the groom and the best friend, now destroyed before her. Now everyone knows who you really are. The judgment was complete. The truth revealed. Justice served. And the bride remained there, standing amid the ruins of what should have been her wedding day. not as a victim, but as a victor. Because sometimes, the best revenge is not to lower yourself to the level of those who betrayed you. It is simply to reveal who you have always been, and let the truth do the rest. And then, with all the dignity that remained in her broken heart, the bride turned. She did not run. She did not scream. She did not hide. She simply walked. Step by step, with her head held high, she crossed the central aisle of the church. The same aisle that should have led her to the arms of true love. The same path that now led her to freedom. The veil still clung to her hair. The bouquet still rested in her hands. But everything had changed. Each step was a silent declaration. I will not be defined by your betrayal. As she walked, something extraordinary happened. The guests, one by one, began to stand. Not to applaud her, not to console her, but simply to witness. To acknowledge that they were seeing something rare in this world. A woman choosing her dignity above all else. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the church, creating a path of colors at her feet. Red, blue, gold. As if even the light was paying homage to her courage. Outside, the world continued. Birds sang. The wind whispered in the trees. Life went on, indifferent to the human drama that had just unfolded. But inside the church, chaos reigned. The groom, still on his knees, tried to find words. Any words, but his mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. What do you say when your greed is exposed before everyone you know? The accomplice? She had shrunk against the wall, her expensive dress now seeming like a cheap costume. The fake jewels around her neck caught the light, each glimmer a reminder of her role in the betrayal. And the groom's relatives? They were the first to act. His mother was the one who began. She stood up from the front row, her face transformed by shame and anger. Without a word, she gathered her purse, turned her back on her son, and walked toward the door. A simple gesture, but devastating. Because in many African cultures, when a mother turns her back on her son, it is far more than rejection. It is spiritual exile. It is to declare, you are no longer of my blood. The father followed, then the uncles, the aunts, the cousins, a silent procession of disapproval. And as they left, something interesting happened. The bride's family did not follow them. They remained, not for lack of anger. Oh, the anger was there, burning in their eyes. But they remained because they knew something important. This story was not over yet. Outside, the bride finally stopped walking. Her legs, which had carried her with such strength, suddenly wavered. She leaned against an ancient tree, its roots deep and strong, witnessing decades of human stories. And then it happened. The tears came. Not the dramatic sobs from movies, not the anguished cries you might expect, but silent tears that slid down her face like rivers of pure pain. Because you see, strength and pain are not opposites. You can be incredibly strong and still be shattered inside. You can choose dignity and still feel as if your heart has been ripped from your chest. And she felt, God, how she felt. Not just the betrayal, not just the humiliation, but the loss of the future she had imagined. The children who would never come, the birthdays not celebrated, the small joys of shared life that were now only smoke. She wept for all of this. And it was okay. It was her mother who found her like this. The older woman approached silently, as only mothers know how, and wrapped her daughter in her arms. For a long moment they said nothing, because sometimes words are too small for the size of pain. But then the mother spoke, and when she did, her voice carried the wisdom of generations. My daughter, she said softly, let me tell you a story that my grandmother told me when I was young. And there, under that ancient tree, as the sun filtered through the leaves, she shared an old fable from her people. Once there was a golden gourd that was full of the most beautiful waters. One day, someone tried to steal that water by making a hole in the gourd. The water flowed out, yes. But do you know what was revealed when the gourd emptied? The bride shook her head, tears still wetting her face. The gold itself, her mother concluded, her eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom. Because when you remove what is temporary, what remains is eternal. He took your water, my daughter, but he cannot touch your gold. Your dignity, your strength, your worth, that is gold. And gold cannot be stolen. Simple words. But ones that carried the weight of centuries of women surviving, resisting, thriving. And something changed in the bride's face. The tears still fell, yes. But her eyes began to shine with something new. Recognition, understanding. The first glimmer of healing. Meanwhile, news of what had happened spread through the community like wildfire. In a tight-knit community, secrets don't last long. And this one? This was no secret. It was a scandal. On the streets, in the shops, in the markets, everywhere, people talked. Did you hear what happened at the wedding? The courage of that girl. And that shameless man. But what was most devastating for the groom and his accomplice was not the words. It was the actions. Doors began to close. Literally. the shop where the groom worked. The owner, a respected man in the community, made it clear that he no longer wanted someone of questionable character on his payroll. The house he rented? The landlord showed up with an eviction notice. I don't want that kind of person on my property. Even at the market, the vendors, those same women who used to greet him with smiles, turned their faces when they saw him pass. His accomplice faced a similar fate. The friends she thought she had, they vanished like morning mist. The men who had once admired her beauty, now they saw her for what she truly was, someone willing to destroy another woman's happiness for greed. The fake jewels she had bought with the stolen money, she tried to sell them, but no one wanted to touch anything associated with such betrayal. Isn't it remarkable how it works? You can believe you're clever enough to deceive people. You can convince yourself your actions will go unpunished. But truth is like sunlight. Eventually, it finds its way through every crack. And when it does, it reveals everything. Meanwhile, something beautiful was happening around the bride. Her community, not just her family, but the entire community, came together in support of her. The older women came with food, ensuring she ate even when grief stole her appetite. Friends arrived just to sit in silence, offering the comfort of a loving presence. Even acquaintances, people who barely knew her, stopped her on the street to say, "You did the right thing. You are an inspiration." And gradually, something began to shift. The pain didn't vanish. Pain like that never disappears overnight. But it began to transform, evolving from an open, bleeding wound into something bearable, something that could eventually heal. 3 months after the wedding that never happened, the bride did something symbolic. She took the wedding dress, that beautiful white creation stained by so many emotions, and transformed it. With the help of a local seamstress, she redesigned it into something new, a party dress. Not white, but blue. Blue like a sky after a storm passes. "Why?" her friend asked as she watched the transformation. "Because," the bride replied, a small smile touching her lips for the first time in months. "I won't let his betrayal define the beauty that still exists in my life. This dress deserves a new story, and so do I." It was a small moment, but significant, because it shows that recovery is not one grand, dramatic gesture. It's a series of small choices. Getting up, smiling, believing that the future can be different from the past. And then, 6 months after that fateful day in the church, something remarkable could be observed. 2 paths, 2 lives, moving in completely different directions. The bride, she flourished. She returned to the studies she had abandoned to plan the wedding. She discovered a passion for community work, helping other women facing betrayal and abuse. Her strength, tested by fire, became something she shared with others. You would see her in the mornings walking to university, books under her arm, a real smile on her face. Not the forced smile of hidden pain, but the genuine smile of someone who had found purpose in the midst of ashes. Her family, already close, became even more united. Dinners transformed into celebrations of survival. Laughter echoed through the house again. And the women of the community, they saw her with silent admiration because she had become living proof of something vital. Betrayal doesn't have to end your story. It can be the beginning of a much better chapter. But the groom and his accomplice? Their paths were very different. You would see them occasionally, diminished figures in the shadows of the community. The groom, who once walked with arrogance, now shuffled along, as if carrying an invisible weight. Jobs were scarce, respect non-existent, friends a distant concept. The accomplice had left the city, unable to bear the looks of judgment. But even in a new place, the shadows of betrayal followed her. Because you can flee from a place, but you cannot flee from yourself. And the money they had coveted so much, the dowry money that had blinded them to decency, it disappeared into lawyers, into debts, into consequences they never could have predicted. It is an ancient law, carved into the very structure of the universe. You reap what you sow, and they had planted greed, betrayal, and deception. Now they were harvesting the bitter fruit of those seeds. But this story is not about them, is it? It is about her, about a woman who chose dignity when it would have been so much easier to choose revenge, who chose healing when it would have been justified to choose bitterness. And as the sun sets over this phase of her journey, one thing becomes crystal clear. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well. It's transforming your pain into power, your betrayal into triumph. It's becoming so brilliant, so strong, so unbreakably yourself, that those who tried to diminish you can only watch in silence as you rise. And rise she did. But her story, friends, isn't over yet. Because a year after that day that changed everything, something extraordinary was about to happen. Something that would prove, beyond any doubt, that when you choose dignity, the universe has a way of honoring that choice. And what happened on that day? That's a story that deserves all the care it demands. Because sometimes life surprises you. Sometimes, when you think you've seen all your journey has to offer, Destiny prepares a plot twist that no one could predict. And this plot twist, it would change everything once more. And that was just the beginning of Amara's transformation. In the months that followed the wedding that never happened, she didn't just rebuild her life, she reinvented it completely. Today, Amara isn't just the young woman who survived betrayal. She became a successful entrepreneur with her own corporate event management consulting firm. Her company, born from the pain of organizing a wedding that turned into revenge, became a reference in the region. Ironic, isn't it? The woman whose own wedding was destroyed by greed now helps others create genuinely memorable moments. But professional success is only part of the story. Amara's relationship with her mother, once marked by desperation and tears, now flourishes in mutual gratitude. They became more than mother and daughter. They became allies, accomplices in the art of transforming pain into purpose. And her father, that humble man who worked tirelessly in carpentry, now rests more. Amara managed to give him what he always wanted, the certainty that his daughter is well, not because she found a man to save her, but because she saved herself. The difference is visual. In photos from what was supposed to be her wedding, Amara smiled. But it was a performative smile, obligatory, the kind of smile you force when all eyes are on you. Now, when you see her on social media, at events, or simply having coffee with friends, the smile is completely different. It's genuine. It's free. It's the smile of someone who isn't faking happiness for anyone. That wasn't the rehearsed joy of a bride fulfilling expectations. This is the authentic joy of a woman who knows herself deeply. And then, 6 months after that unforgettable day, something remarkable happened. Amara was invited to speak at a conference on female entrepreneurship in the capital. The auditorium was packed. More than 500 women, young and old, from different backgrounds, all there seeking inspiration, guidance, some spark to propel them forward. When Amara took the stage, wearing an elegant navy blazer that she herself bought with the first significant profit from her company, there was a moment of silence. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a conqueror. "My name is Amara," she began, her voice firm and echoing through the speakers. "6 months ago, I was supposed to become a wife. Instead, I became the architect of my own destiny." The audience leaned forward, captivated. And then Amara told her story, not with bitterness, but with perspective. Not with hatred, but with wisdom. She narrated each part. The initial excitement of the engagement, the accidental discovery of the betrayal, the decision not to cancel the wedding, but to transform it into a moment of truth. "When I heard my fiancé and my best friend laughing at me," she said, her voice calm but penetrating, "my first instinct was to fall apart. My second was to seek destructive revenge. But then, I remembered something my mother always told me. The most powerful revenge isn't destroying the other. It's building yourself so brilliantly that they become irrelevant." The audience erupted in applause. Amara continued, "So I didn't destroy the wedding. I transformed it into a mirror that reflected who they really were. And in the process, I discovered who I really am. A woman who doesn't need anyone's validation. A woman who chooses dignity over drama, wisdom over blind rage." Tears streamed down the faces of dozens of women in the audience. They weren't tears of pity. They were tears of recognition. How many of them had been betrayed? How many had been diminished? How many were, at that very moment, deciding if they were worth anything? And there was Amara, proving that yes, they're worth it. That someone else's betrayal doesn't define your worth. After the speech, dozens of women approached her. Some wanted business advice. Others wanted to know how she overcame the pain. And Amara, patient and generous, shared with each one. "You don't need to be defined by the worst day of your life. You can use it as fuel for your best chapter." That conference was just the beginning. Amara started being regularly invited to events, universities, community programs. Her story resonated because it was universal. Not just about a broken marriage, but about reclaimed dignity. About choosing herself when everyone expected her to fall apart. She even started mentoring young women, especially those from poorer communities, teaching them not just about entrepreneurship, but about self-knowledge. About never allowing another person's greed or betrayal to diminish their inner light. But what about Marcus and Sarah? What happened to them? Here's the most delicious detail of the entire story. Amara didn't need to do absolutely anything to destroy them. Their own greed took care of that. Remember how Marcus was desperate for Amara's family money? Remember how he planned to use that marriage as a financial springboard? Well, without that marriage, without that alliance, his plans crumbled like a house of cards. His business, which relied on investments he expected to secure through Amara's family, collapsed in less than 4 months. The debts he accumulated, having bet that marriage as his financial salvation, started piling up. Creditors started calling. Investment proposals evaporated when the story of how he publicly humiliated his bride spread through the business community. Who wants to do business with a man without integrity? And Sarah? Sarah learned a lesson that every traitor eventually learns. If he cheats with you, he'll cheat on you too. 3 months after the disastrous wedding, she discovered Marcus with another woman. And when she confronted him, furious, he laughed in her face exactly as he had laughed at Amara. Justice, it turned out, has a poetic sense of humor. Today, 5 years later, Marcus lives from gig to gig, his reputation destroyed not by Amara, but by his own choices. And Sarah? She moved to another city, unable to face the shame of having sacrificed her best friend for a man who discarded her like trash. Amara learned about all of this not because she pursued them, but because the community, that same community that witnessed her humiliation and then her dignity, felt the need to tell her. "You were right not to lower yourself," an old acquaintance told her. Their fall was their own doing, and Amara, with that wisdom that now defines her, simply smiled and said, "I wish them peace. I really do. But that peace will need to come from within them, just as mine came from within me. Without bitterness, without petty triumph. Just the deep tranquility of someone who understands that true victory isn't watching others fall. It's rising so high that their fall becomes irrelevant to your peace." And then, one Sunday afternoon, something magical happened. Amara was visiting her mother, and the two were having tea in the small garden her father had cultivated with such care. Amara's mother, watching her daughter, radiant, serene, completely transformed, held her hand and said something that would be etched in Amara's heart forever. "My daughter, our ancestors had a proverb. A woman who knows her worth cannot be diminished by another's blindness. When you were small, I feared you would never learn this, but look at you now. You didn't just learn it, you became the teaching itself." Tears filled Amara's eyes, not from sadness, but from deep gratitude. Her mother was right. Marcus's betrayal hadn't diminished her. It had revealed something she didn't know she possessed, an inner strength so powerful that no betrayal could shake it. "Mother," Amara replied, squeezing her hand, "if I hadn't heard that conversation, I might have married him. I might have spent years believing I was a fraud, that I was a joke. But that moment of pain gave me the greatest gift, the knowledge of who I really am, and that's a wealth no one can steal from me." Her mother smiled, and in that smile was the wisdom of generations. "True revenge, my daughter, is living so well that those who tried to hurt you realize they never had power over you. And you achieved that with such grace that your story now teaches other women to do the same. The story of the bride who heard the betrayal, but answered with dignity. The story of the woman who transformed her greatest humiliation into her greatest moment of power. The story that proved you don't need to destroy your enemies. You just need to build yourself so magnificently that they become irrelevant." Today, when you see Amara, whether in her bustling company, whether on a stage inspiring hundreds, whether simply laughing with true friends at a cafe, you see a woman completely free. Free from betrayal, free from bitterness, free from the need to prove anything to anyone. She never needed Marcus to validate her. She already knew who she was, and that is the greatest lesson of all. In the end, Amara's story isn't really about revenge. It's about rescuing herself from the clutches of people who never deserved her. It's about choosing dignity when the world expected drama. It's about transforming pain into purpose, betrayal into testimony, humiliation into elevation. It's about understanding, deep in your soul, that the greatest wealth is not money, status, or external validation. The greatest wealth is self-knowledge. And no one, absolutely no one, can steal what you know you're worth. 3 African proverbs perfectly summarize Amara's journey. The tree that stands firm after the storm has deeper roots than those that were never tested. Amara was tested by the storm of betrayal, and her roots, her dignity, her worth, her inner strength, proved to be unbreakable. When you know who you are, the opinions of others become merely distant noise. Marcus and Sarah could laugh at her behind her back, but in the moment she confronted them with the truth, that laughter turned to ash, because she knew her worth, and that was more powerful than any ridicule. And finally, true victory does not lie in defeating your enemy, but in becoming so magnificent that the battle itself loses its meaning. Amara did not need to destroy Marcus and Sarah. She simply became so powerful, so successful, so complete, that they ceased to matter. They became secondary characters in the story of her own greatness. And so, Amara's story entered the folklore of her community. Grandmothers tell it to granddaughters. Mentors share it with apprentices. Women facing their own betrayals whisper to themselves, "Be like Amara. Choose dignity. Choose yourself." Because in the end, it's not the betrayal that defines you. It's how you choose to rise after it. Amara chose to rise as a queen, not through the crown that a man could have given her, but through the crown she herself forged with resilience, wisdom, and unshakable dignity. And that crown? No one will ever be able to take it from you. The final image that lingers is this. Amara, surrounded by young women whom she now mentors, laughing freely at a community gathering. There are no more traces of that nervous bride who almost accepted a life of lies. There are no more shadows of that young woman who heard her worth be mocked. There is only a woman who knows, deeply and completely, who she is, and who uses that knowledge not for petty revenge, but for collective elevation, inspiring other women to never, ever accept less than they deserve. Because in the end, true revenge is not making someone suffer. It's living so well, so authentically, so powerfully, that those who tried to harm you realize, too late, that you were always far greater than they could ever diminish. And if you're watching this now, and you've been through betrayal, through humiliation, through moments when someone tried to make you believe you were worth nothing, remember this. Their betrayal reveals their weakness, not your lack of worth. Their ridicule exposes the poverty of their own character, not a flaw in your dignity. And their attempt to diminish you only reveals that they were never great enough to stand beside you. Your dignity is your power. Your self-knowledge is your armor. And your ability to choose wisdom over bitterness, elevation over petty revenge. That is what makes you not a victim, but a victor. So, like Amara, choose dignity, choose wisdom, choose yourself. Because in the end, the person who knows their worth doesn't need to destroy anyone. They just need to shine so brightly that everyone around them perceives the truth. That woman was never the joke. She was always the lesson. And what a magnificent lesson that is.